the same as if I have parents that come into the classroom, and if they happen to have their own thing going on in their lives and they happen not to attend to their child that night, I form an opinion, and I happen to have an opinion that your children come first, and it should have been that you should have been there for your children. And so in that case, the same thing. Your child should have come first before you, and the first thing on your mind should have been your child. So that's forming an opinion. Yes, can I leave that aside? As far as I said before, absolutely, I can leave it aside and whatever is presented to me on that day, as far as or during these next whatever it may be, as far as evidence is concerned. Yes, and what's presented in front of me, moving all of that out. Yes, I can do that. But I have to do it every day with parents who are in front of me, and because you don't know what's going on in their lives as far as why they weren't there. But if I happen to hear that they were, they had to do something for themselves, I form an opinion myself. Do I express it? No. But I have an opinion, and that was what was asked of me of that day. I have an opinion of what happened.
You have an opinion of what happened? Of what happened,
that the child is now gone because he forgot him in the car. Yes, I have an opinion of that.
Okay.
But can I leave it aside? Yes, I can, because as far as the evidence that's in front of because I think what's on trial is whether he did it on purpose or not, and whatever is brought to my attention then and brought in front of me of that, that's what's going to be brought in the next couple of weeks or the next weeks. Mm-hmm.
Of course, Mr. Evans indicated, everybody comes in here with a different background and experiences, and everybody doesn't have the same opinions. So do you believe that, based on your background and the opinions that you come in here with, do you believe that you're going to be able to be fair and impartial to both sides?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to excuse you. Come back October 3rd, 9 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Should we let the other panel go till tomorrow at 9? We had the next 12 out there. Yeah. Okay. 9 o'clock.
Yeah. My preference would be to try to finish up these other 4 if humanly possible. Anybody got a problem with that?
That's our preference.
Well, I'm still going to ask them, but their needs are regarding child care, etc. So, tell us, Mr. Pardue. Where did Mr. Pardue go? Mr. Pardue, do you know where he went? Did he go to get the other next juror?
Yes.
Okay. I need a juror. Yes, that'll work. Or the one by it. Just get comfortable. It'll be fine. Oh, well, take a deep breath and then coffee up. Coffee down. Take and proceed.
All right.
Ma'am, we're going to continue to use your number to kind of protect your privacy. There are several questions that some of the jurors had or were posed that led to responses that we wanted to address outside the presence of other jurors. So that's the purpose here, just to give you a heads up. Is we're going to talk to you about some of the questions that you raised your hand for, specifically some of the what we call statutory questions that the judge had asked you about very early on Tuesday. Okay. Two of those questions. One of them was, had you heard anything about the case before coming to court? And we have down that you said that you had, correct? Okay. And then the other question is, have you formed or expressed an opinion regarding the guilt or innocence of the accused? And you raised your hand for that question too. Is that correct? Okay. Understanding that we won't live in a vacuum. Everybody's different. Some people have more information on things, or think they have more information on things than others, and everyone has their personal experiences. We want to delve into that a little bit and find out, a little more about what it is you may have heard and how it is that might impact your ability to be a fair juror in this case. Does that make sense? So if you're selected as a juror in the case, whatever you may have heard prior to coming to court, you would be required to base your decision solely on the evidence presented in the law that the judge gives you, okay? And not on any opinion that you may have formed prior to coming to court. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you were seated as a juror in this case, would you be able to do those two things?
I think if you had asked me that before this process, I would have said no. But going through this process has definitely opened my mind to a point of understanding a little more about the situation. So yes, I think I could.
Okay, so you think you could listen to the facts and evidence presented and apply the law?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And base your decision on that, not anything you may have heard about beforehand.
Right.
One of the questions we asked is there anyone here who knows the defendant, Justin Ross Harris? And you indicated you didn't know him prior to this process. Do you have any, that being said, do you have any personal bias against him as a person or anything like that?
As a human being, no.
Okay. Having articulated for us that you think you could do that, base your decision solely on the facts, the evidence, and the law in this case. Do you think you're capable of doing those things?
Yes.
All right. How was the process? You just said it had kind of opened your eyes. How have things changed since you gave that affirmative response that you formed and expressed an opinion?
Well, it's kind of in two ways. The first, when we walked into the courtroom Monday, and the defendant was seated here at the table, it's different when you see someone's picture in the news article or on, online, but when you're actually in the room, then you realize, there are no monsters. People may or may not do monstrous things, but we're all human beings, and that really hit home with me. And then when the judge was saying, keep an open mind, you haven't actually seen any evidence, and I was thinking, and that's true, because all that I had seen was what was in the newspaper,
right? And
I don't have any way to corroborate, whether that's actually true or whether it isn't. So if it was me seated at that table, I would want the people sitting here to hear the evidence and base it off that, not what they read in the paper or what they talked about by the water cooler, but what was actually factually before them.
Okay. All right. So you initially said, hey, I've heard some stuff. I formed and expressed an opinion. Okay. And then going through this process and listening to the judge, some of the instructions, for example, about, don't read anything or do any, you now kind of opened your eyes to the words you used to what your role needs to be. Is that accurate?
Right.
Okay. What is it that you heard prior to coming to court, and from what source?
Okay, I'm going to try to remember because it's been some years ago. I do remember that something about being on the way to daycare and forgetting. I remember something that stuck out in my mind was that they had said that he went back to the car in the afternoon around lunchtime.
Right.
And then I do remember hearing later something about they texting with young girls.
Okay.
But those are the only things, I'm sure at the time that I did know more, but those are the only things that I remember now.
I got you.
You know.
You can kind of break this into almost like a little timeline. There's been some modern reporting about some certain things, and then there's the early on reports. It sounds like you're referring to that latter category, the early on reports when this happened. Is that correct?
And I did see, I did when it first happened, and then, I didn't go seek it out, but here and there you will see things on Facebook and things like that, and I would read, updates and things. And I did, I'm just going to put this out there too in all fairness. In the beginning, there was a Facebook group following the trial, when the trial started, and I was part of that group, and I would see little updates now and then. When I got the summons to come here, I hadn't seen an update from that group in a long time, but I did see something pop up that said that the jury selection was going to start in Brunswick, so I immediately left that group just because I felt like that was not really appropriate. I had forgotten to be part of it, to be honest, but I didn't feel like it was appropriate in case this was the case that we were being pulled for, so I just left the group then.
Did you, do you remember what the group was called on Facebook?
I think it might have been Justin Harris Trial Watch, perhaps.
Okay. This may answer the next question I have. There's several things here we need to talk to you about. One of them was there was a question: have you ever typed an opinion on the case, or have you ever posted an opinion about the case? And you're nodding your head. Have you done that?
Yeah, in the beginning, I think, and I have been struggling the last couple of days to try to remember everything. But I think in the beginning, I did discuss it with other people, in maybe that format would be on some news things.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Do you remember what it is you might have typed about the case? What opinion you might have put out there?
I've always said, and again, it's been a hard process for me to come to terms with why I felt the way I did, but I've always said I can't understand how anyone could forget their child. Like, how do you do that? How does that happen? So that has always been kind of the thing that glitched it for me, was like, how do you do that, and how does that happen?
Right. Okay.
But I've never ever said anything like, I've seen some terrible comments, like, when people say, like, hitting the person, or, I've never said anything, nasty like that. But just, I don't understand, that I didn't understand, and that it didn't make sense to me, some of the things.
I see. So what you posted is basically an opinion about certain facts that you were hearing about, and about how that could happen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that also why you said, and correctly so, Judge said, have you formed and expressed an opinion, and you did that?
I've always, and talking to, different people that said, that I thought some of the stuff was a little shady, that it didn't make a lot of sense, some things didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Right. Okay.
Suspect, maybe the word that some of it was a little suspect to me.
I have a notation here that you've also had some discussions with family members or other people that may have shared opinions with you as well. Is that?
My husband and I.
Okay.
We chit chat about things.
All right. What kinds of things did you talk about regarding this case?
I had a conversation with him. He gets angry with me because for the last probably almost 3 years, I tell him every time he leaves the house with my children, don't forget kids in the car.
Yeah.
Don't forget kids in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And then I call him 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes later to make sure he has not forgotten kids in the car, and to make sure that everybody's okay.
Okay.
I think because I lost a child, I'm especially, even though I know he's a good dad, when they're not with me, I worry.
Understood.
So I do check up on him. And we discuss that because he gets angry at me, and he says, Heather, I'm not going to leave the kids in the car. Like, stop harassing me, stop calling me.
Sure.
Stop doing it.
That's all right. You haven't said anything.
So I have discussed with him why I do that.
Makes sense.
Why I do that, because you hear about these cases every summer.
So you've kind of got into the other topic that I wanted to talk to you about, and I told you I wanted to do it in a more private setting. One of the questions was, is there anyone here, who's experienced the sudden loss of a child? And you said that you had, and this was a child that you lost. It was an infant, is that correct?
He was 41 weeks in utero.
Okay.
He passed in utero.
I see.
So he wasn't depending on who you talk to.
Right. No, I understand that. Is there anything about that situation that you think might weigh on you such that you cannot be fair and impartial in this case if you're seated as a juror?
I don't think so.
Okay.
My loss doesn't have anything to do with anyone else.
Okay. All right, thank you, ma'am.
When we're talking about the information that you received about this matter, I'm getting the sense a lot of it was from the internet.
Yeah, I don't have cable.
Okay.
I like Hulu and Netflix and stuff, but we don't have cable. That way I can kind of keep my children from seeing anything I don't want them to see.
Right. So, besides any news footage or news stories, by any chance did you watch any court proceedings?
No.
Did not watch any court
No,
proceedings?
I didn't even know that they were videotaped.
Okay. And we haven't touched on this, but all of our notes indicate that you indicated that you did get information from legal talk shows. Did you answer yes to that?
Not a legal talk show, maybe like a morning show.
Okay.
Like maybe if my mom was watching, I do think I saw one. My mom was watching my niece, and they were doing actually one of the PSAs about leaving your shoes in the back of the car and stuff. And I did see some things, but I don't watch actual legal talk shows.
All right. Which gets me to really what I want to know, and I guess that you've answered the question, is if you get on this jury, are you going to be able to avoid the legal talk shows and the talking heads type shows in addition to any news coverage?
I find those things very boring. I don't watch those things.
Okay.
You know, like people sitting around the table, like chatting.
Or just sitting in front of a camera talking.
Yeah, I don't. I don't even, I guess it's bad I don't even watch the local news.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to excuse you until October 3rd at 9 a.m. Return to the jury assembly room then. Thank you. Thank you. Juror 21. Yeah, you're good. You're fine. Go ahead.
Hey, Juror 21, again, using your number for obvious reasons, so we'll continue to do that. This should not take very long, I certainly hope. There are a couple of areas that we just needed to speak to you about, some questions we had about some of your early responses, and then you indicated you had something you wanted to share in more private settings, so we wanted to do that. The first thing is, the judge on Tuesday asked some questions, some general questions, and I don't think you raised your hand for most of the statutory questions except for one. One was, had you heard anything about this case before you came to court? I think you indicated that you had. Is that correct?
Right. And admittedly, this is my first time on a jury selection or anything
Sure.
like that. I'm a young guy. I looked up the case.
Okay.
After, when we were in there and they told us what the case was going to be, I looked up. But I didn't really delve into it very deep or anything like that.
But that was
it was purely out of curiosity.
That makes sense. I mean, people are curious, and once you knew what the case was. I assume that was before the judge gave you instructions.
That was.
Okay. So you looked up the first day when you first got sworn, and before you were told, hey, you're not supposed to. Okay. The law requires that to be a juror in the case, what you've got to do is be able to base your decision not on anything that you may have heard outside of the courtroom, but solely on the evidence presented and the law that the judge gives you. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you were seated as a juror in this case, you'd be required to do those two things. Would you be able to do that, base your decision on the evidence and the law? Okay, and not on anything that you may have heard about outside the courtroom?
Like I stressed earlier, I think it's important to look at both sides of any issue. And I don't think this is any exception.
Very good. So I'll move on from that topic now. I don't need to get into all of the gory details, I hope, about this prior situation with you that you wanted to share in a more private setting. The two questions that I think prompted a response was, do you know anyone who's been arrested? And then was something about a false accusation.
One of my really, really close friends was arrested on possession with intent to distribute marijuana.
I see.
And the way that he was arrested and the officer who was at that time with the GBI, the way that he handled it, and he illegally searched his phone. He did such a bad job with his initial investigation when he was actually pulled over and arrested that it was eventually thrown out.
Okay, it was just thrown out. So what you're referring to is a very close friend of yours then?
Right. It was kind of, to me, fell victim of, the officer was somebody that knew another one of our friends, and he had always been after that friend, so he was really, just did some sort of shady stuff.
I see. What happened to your friend's case?
Got, like I said,
Dismissed. All right. Is there anything about that prior situation? It has nothing to do with this case, obviously.
Right.
But is there anything about that prior situation that would lead you to believe you couldn't be fair and impartial in this totally separate case?
No.
Okay. I think that's all I got.
I appreciate you sharing that with us. Unfortunately, I do need to ask you about the article that you looked up. Was it just one story, or did you read?
It was one story. All I knew was that it seemed to be high profile, and I just wanted to know. I just wanted a little bit of background information. It was actually an article written in Glenn County about jury summons and how they had done jury summons for this trial and everything like that. And I didn't even read the whole article. Like I said, I was just trying to kind of get a basis. It didn't have anything about the trial or anything. It was just, like I said, really written more about the large jury summons that had been initiated.
Okay. Appreciate you being honest about that, telling us. I know probably scared you to have to come in here and tell us that, but appreciate you doing
It made me
that.
feel kind of foolish because
Well, like you said, this is your first time.
this is my first time. I had no idea. It was a nice mistake.
You're going to give both sides a fair trial, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, excuse you, but you're to come back October 3rd, 9 a.m. Have a good evening. Juror 22. Just have a seat, be comfortable.
Hey, Juror 22, continue to refer to you by your number just for your privacy, okay? And this should not take very long, I certainly hope. There are a couple areas that we need to cover with you in a more private setting, and one of those you actually asked to be in a private setting, so we're trying to accommodate you. The first thing is, the judge asked a series of questions on Tuesday, and one of the questions was, had you heard anything about this case prior to coming to court? And I believe that you raised your hand and said, I've heard something about the case before court. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't live in a bubble. We don't live in a vacuum. We're all personal, humans that have our own experiences and have our own knowledge base. Some people are really into the news. Some people aren't. And some of the things you may hear before court are accurate. Some of the things you may hear, quite frankly, are just not accurate. Regardless, that's not evidence. Would you agree with that?
I agree totally.
Okay. And in fact, we haven't presented any evidence to any jurors yet. The case hasn't really started. So my question to you is, the requirements, if you were to be considered a juror in this case, you would have to base your decision solely on the evidence presented and the law that the judge gives you, and on nothing else. Do you understand that? So, and then you probably know this better than anyone because you got a bit of a law enforcement background with your husband and everything. That's probably not news to you. A question I pose to you then is, if selected as a juror in this case, would you follow those requirements and base your decision solely on the evidence and the law that the judge gives you? Okay. And not on anything else that you may have heard?
So I really haven't heard, I haven't read anything for, between when it happened, I think when it first happened, was the only thing that I saw. I haven't read anything further than that.
That was going to be my next question. I wanted to know, when was it that you heard this? And it sounds like it was way back then.
Yes, it was.
Okay, nothing modern day then.
No.
Do you know what it is you heard or read about the case or heard about it?
I just remember seeing the clip and the picture and of the child being deceased in the car when someone was at work, and I believe the picture that I got in my mind was the distraught
Okay.
when it happened, I heard back to both of them.
Okay.
That's all I've read. I haven't read any details about anything.
You haven't certainly done any research or anything like that? Okay. And you understand what we've just discussed, the importance of basing the decision on the facts and the evidence and the law. Despite what you may have seen outside of court, you'd be able to follow those instructions and do that? Okay. The only other thing that I need to talk to you about, there were two responses that I believe are kind of related to each other. And I don't want to get into the gory details of it, but one of the questions was, do you know anyone of you or anyone else in your family or friend been treated unfairly within the criminal justice system? And then you also indicated involves an arrest. Are those both related to each other, or are they two separate things?
There could be two separate things. There's, let's go with one at a time.
Okay.
Which would be the first.
Somebody being treated unfair within the criminal justice system.
Well, it was the Florida judicial system, which Glenn was involved too, but it had to do with my daughter and during her marriage. She lived in Key West, and he was unfaithful to her. And at the same time, my dad was sick, and Mary, my daughter, came to visit me to see her grandfather. So at that time, I noticed there was something different in her language on the phone with her husband. And so I gathered there was something going on. So Mary was very distraught. So when we got home, she found out that there was something not right. So, and she didn't have any clothes, she didn't have anything else. So I said, Mary, we'll get Brian, my other son, and we'll go down and see what's going on. And if you need to come home, you know. And so when we went down there, she couldn't get in touch with her husband because he was out with her at the time. And when Mary got there, there was her stuff. There was all female stuff all around. Mary was very distraught, and she was very angry and hurt, and she just took her stuff and threw it in because they lived right on the beach.
I see.
So the ocean was right there.
Okay.
She gathered her stuff and threw it, and she was so angry in the ocean. And anyway, I said, Mary, come, let's go home. You're coming home with Mom. So the next day, or maybe the day after, something like that, Glenn County came and arrested Mary at our house. And charged her with a fugitive, leaving, I think that's what it was.
Really? Okay.
And I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
And they said, well, it's because she left, she did this or whatever. I said, that was her home. That was her house, and someone else was living there, and there's stuff, And so I tried to talk to a lot of people in Glenn County. I said, this is ridiculous. And they locked Mary up for a couple of weeks. And, but you know what? after this really bad thing that happened, Mary got something good out of it because she made friends with a lot of the female people that were there. And she developed a need to help people.
Okay, all right. Well, sometimes you can find positives, the ray of light, so to speak, in negative situations. I'm sorry that you and your family had to go through that experience. What happened to the case was eventually...
She had to go, she was extradited back to Key West, and had to stay there until trial, until we bailed her out, and then we had to go back and bring her for trial. And they charged her with whatever she had to pay, pay back whatever they chose to that she threw into the ocean.
Right.
And actually, Mary was charged with this. I just thought that was just unfair.
Sure.
Total unfair against Mary and having to go to jail here. And when we tried our best to say, would you put her in our, let her stay with us until this is done. And so I just couldn't understand that. But anyway, that's the way,
Understand that that's a completely different situation than what we've got here. And is there anything about that that will impact your ability to follow your obligations here as a juror?
You can still have things in your heart, but you have to.
Of course.
I understand that.
I'm a little surprised that would happen, but everybody's a little bit different sometimes. What about the second thing, the arrest where you hired the attorney?
Well, we had a will and of course my divorce.
Okay. Was there another the arrest that you said you wanted to talk about privately? Was that your daughter or was that something else?
That was my daughter. There was my other son. The year he graduated, he got caught with marijuana in his car. And brought before he was arrested and brought for Judge Williams, and they got kind of settled it, and he got shipped off into the Marines instead of anything else. So that was kind of the deal. My husband and him kind of dealt with that. I didn't have that. And then it always say that the worst kids come from preachers and not kids. But then my third son got arrested for drugs here, and foolish thing, but he turned out, because of that incident, it was a very positive thing for him. But he went through drug court with Amanda Williams, Judge Amanda Williams.
Okay.
It was totally just a positive thing for him. So.
What I appreciate about talking with you is that even your negative stories always have a positive ending to it, whether it's a traffic ticket or throwing clothes into the ocean. So I'm pleased to hear that there are at least some positives of those negative experiences. And I don't think I have any more questions for you. I don't have any questions.
Come back, October 3rd, 9 a.m. Yes, ma'am, you do. Juror 23. Just head on down the road. Mr. Culpepper's going to show you exactly where it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, Juror 23, I'm going to continue to use your number to kind of respect your privacy to the degree we're able. Only reason we brought you back is because you had an answer that you asked to share in a more private context.
Yes, sir.
And the question involved an arrest. And we're trying to just accommodate you for that. Is there something you wanted to share about that? We don't need to get into all of the sort of
My
details.
husband was, the husband I have now was arrested for drunk driving.
Okay.
And he got a year probation,
All right.
and he got to pay a fine. And I went to the probation office with him, and I told him if he ever drink again, I will call them, so he hasn't drank since.
Great.
And that's been, 7 years, 3 years each.
Okay, great. Is there anything about that situation that would impact your ability to be fair in this completely separate case? Thank you, ma'am. I don't have anything further for you.
And Mr. Kilgore,
Don't have any questions.
we could excuse you. Come back October 3rd, 9 a.m.
Yes, ma'am.
Have a good evening. Thank you, ma'am. No. Kiss it down.
I don't think he's been instructed when to come back.
You can tell him.
Can we do that? Okay.
How much time do y'all need to confer? 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
Do you need a whatever break too?
That's including the break.
Well, that's remarkable, but I won't make the remark. Okay.
I don't think these jurors have to be here for us to do that. Is there any reason why we keep this good in the morning, Judge?
Because I want to start at 9 o'clock
Okay.
and move briskly.
All right. Well, then I guess counting the short break for the bathroom, I would ask for 10 minutes.
6 o'clock, be back here. Oh.